In the quiet town of Tifton, Georgia, beneath the surface of Southern charm and community pride, a devastating secret simmered, one that would lead to betrayal, heartbreak, and murder. What started as a forbidden romance spiraled into a nightmare that left an entire community grappling with questions that might never be fully answered. This is the tragic story of a respected man, a cheating husband, and the dark consequences of his affair with a 19-year-old girl, a story of love, obsession, and murder that stunned everyone who knew them. Willie Tanner was the kind of man people admired. At 49, he was the proud owner of Tanner's Hardware, a cornerstone of Tifton for over 20 years. His store wasn't just a place to pick up tools and supplies, it was a hub for neighbors, a space where people came not only for help with their home projects but also for Willie's warm smile and friendly advice. He was, by all accounts, a man who embodied Southern hospitality in hard work. But behind the well-polished facade of a devoted husband, a community leader, and a beloved businessman, Willie was hiding a scandalous secret that would unravel his perfect image. His life was anything but ideal. Beneath the veneer of marital bliss with his wife, Lynn Tanner, lay a web of lies and forbidden desires. And at the center of this storm was Madison Kelly. Madison was no ordinary young woman. At just 19, she was known for her striking beauty, sharp wit, and an aura that drew people in. She had dreams of leaving Tifton behind, but fate had other plans. She often visited Tanner's Hardware, where her charm didn't go unnoticed by Willie. What began as casual conversations over a toolbox or a paint can evolve into something far more dangerous, a relationship that crossed every line of morality and decency. Willie, torn between his responsibilities as a husband and his infatuation with Madison, found himself on a path he could no longer control. The affair was intense, intoxicating, and reckless. Madison, for her part, was equally captivated by the older man who offered her a glimpse of a life she craved, attention, affection, and a sense of importance she didn't find elsewhere. But their passion was laced with secrecy and deceit, a volatile mix that would eventually ignite into tragedy. As the weeks turned into months, Willie became increasingly consumed by his double life. By December 2019, the holiday season was in full swing, and Tifton buzzed with festive cheer. But in Willie's world, there was no peace. The strain of juggling his affair with Madison and his marriage to Lynn began to take a toll. He worked late nights, offering flimsy excuses to his wife, who, though deeply in love with him, couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. Lynn had always been Willie's rock. High school sweethearts, the couple had weathered life's ups and downs together, and Lynn trusted him implicitly. But as Christmas approached, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Willie was no longer the man she knew. He was distracted, irritable, and distant, haunted by the weight of his secret. Friends noticed the change, too. Willie, once the life of the room, now seemed withdrawn and preoccupied. What no one could see, however, was the dangerous undercurrent running beneath Willie and Madison's affair. The relationship, fiery and full of emotional extremes, was beginning to unravel. Madison, once enthralled by the excitement of their forbidden romance, started to feel the sting of Willie's indecision. Torn between his growing feelings for her and the guilt of betraying Lynn, Willie became increasingly erratic, his mood swinging wildly between affection and avoidance. For Madison, this wasn't just an affair, it was everything. And as Willie pulled away, desperate to reconcile with the life he'd built with Lynn, Madison felt betrayed. What she had seen as love, he now treated as a mistake. The emotional tension escalated, and with it, Madison's feelings of abandonment and anger grew. She wasn't about to let him walk away without consequences. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a chilly evening just days before Christmas, and Tifton streets were adorned with festive lights. But inside the Tanner home, the atmosphere was far from merry. What happened next remains a puzzle of conflicting accounts, but one thing is clear, the confrontation between Willie, Madison, and the truth led to a violent and tragic end. When the police arrived, they found a scene that would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. Willie Tanner was dead, the victim of a brutal attack that left the town reeling. Madison was arrested at the scene, her hands trembling and her face streaked with tears. The once vibrant young woman was now a suspect in a murder that would send shockwaves through the community. The trial that followed was a media sensation, exposing the depths of Willie's double life and Madison's emotional turmoil. Testimonies revealed a relationship built on secrecy and lies, a tangled web of betrayal that ultimately turned deadly. For Lynn Tanner, the revelations were shattering: her husband's infidelity, the scandal that tarnished his reputation, and the devastating loss of the man she loved. Today, the town of Tifton still bears the scars of that dark chapter. Willie's death left unanswered questions and a legacy forever stained by betrayal and tragedy. Madison's fate was sealed in a courtroom, but the emotional toll of their affair and its catastrophic end continues to linger. This story isn't just about a forbidden romance, it's about the choices we make, the lies we tell, and the devastating consequences that can follow. Willie Tanner's life ended in tragedy, but the lessons from his story serve as a haunting reminder of what happens when secrets consume us. It was the morning of December 22, 2019, just days before Christmas. The small town of Tifton, Georgia, was alive with holiday cheer. Families were finishing up last-minute shopping, decorating their homes, and preparing for festive gatherings. But on this quiet Sunday morning, beneath the facade of holiday joy, a horrifying discovery would plunge the Tanner household, and the entire town, into a nightmare. Lynn Tanner had just returned from Sunday service at First Baptist Church, where she had spent the morning volunteering for the upcoming Christmas Eve celebration. She loved this time of year; it brought a sense of peace and unity to the community. As she pulled into the driveway of her home on Bride Street, something caught her eye. Willie's truck was parked in its usual spot, a detail that seemed off. Willie had told her he needed to pick up some last-minute supplies for the hardware store, yet here his truck sat, unmoved. Puzzled but dismissing the thought, Lynn walked up the steps to their neatly decorated home. The fresh pine scent from the Christmas tree they had decorated together greeted her as she opened the door. The tree stood proudly in the living room, adorned with twinkling lights and ornaments. Beneath it were brightly wrapped gifts, some with her name scrawled lovingly in Willie's handwriting. But something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Too quiet. "Willie," she called, her voice echoing through the stillness. There was no response. Lynn's steps quickened as a knot of unease tightened in her stomach. She moved toward the living room, and froze. The sight before her was something out of a nightmare. Willie's lifeless body lay sprawled on the floor near the base of the Christmas tree. Broken ornaments and tinsel surrounded him, creating a grotesque juxtaposition of holiday cheer and unspeakable violence. His head was a mangled mess, blood pooling around him and splattering onto the carefully wrapped gifts. A hammer, its handle sticky with blood, lay discarded nearby. Lynn's knees buckled, and she let out a scream that pierced the quiet morning air. Trembling, she fumbled for her phone and dialed 911. Tears blurred her vision as she struggled to form words. "Oh my God! My husband, he's not breathing. There's blood everywhere," she sobbed. The operator's calm voice guided her, urging her not to touch anything and to wait outside for the authorities. Lynn stumbled onto the front porch, her body trembling uncontrollably as she tried to process what she had just seen. Her once idyllic life had shattered in an instant. Within minutes, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles lit up Bride Street. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, whispering and speculating about what could have happened. Was it a robbery gone wrong? Or something even darker? Detective Nora Collins arrived on the scene, stepping out of her unmarked car with a focused intensity that signaled her determination to uncover the truth. A veteran officer with over 15 years of experience, Collins was known for her sharp intuition and meticulous approach to investigations. But even she was momentarily taken aback by the scene inside the Tanner home. The living room was a surreal mixture of festive decorations and brutal violence. The Christmas lights twinkled innocently, reflecting off the shattered ornaments and blood-stained wrapping paper. Willie's body lay near the tree, his head crushed by what appeared to be multiple blows from the hammer. Detective Collins scanned the room, her mind racing as she pieced together the evidence. If you're captivated by stories like this and want more gripping true crime content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories, so join our growing community today. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The hammer was immediately bagged as evidence, and the forensic team got to work. There were no signs of a struggle beyond the immediate area, suggesting Willie had been completely caught off guard. Detective Collins noted the precision of the attack. This was no random act of violence. The brutality indicated rage, possibly rooted in betrayal or jealousy. As Dr. Philip K. Wong, the medical examiner, arrived to examine the body, he confirmed the obvious: Willie Tanner's death had been gruesome and immediate. Severe head trauma from repeated strikes was the cause. Based on the state of rigor mortis, Dr. Wong estimated the time of death to be sometime between 1 p.m. and midnight the previous night. The timeline didn't sit well with Lynn's account of events, raising more questions than answers. Detective Collins turned her attention to Lynn, who sat on the porch in a state of shock. Despite her grief, Lynn managed to provide a basic timeline of Willie's movements the day before. He had been distant lately, spending long hours at the store and growing increasingly withdrawn. She had assumed it was holiday stress. Now, she wasn't so sure. As the investigation progressed, cracks began to form in the facade of Willie's seemingly perfect life. Rumors surfaced about his affair with Madison Kelly, the 19-year-old woman who had been seen visiting Tanner's Hardware frequently. Madison wasn't just a customer, she was the center of Willie's secret life. The relationship, once fiery and intoxicating, had devolved into a toxic cocktail of obsession, manipulation, and resentment. Madison quickly became a person of interest. Her connection to Willie was no secret to a few close acquaintances, and her recent behavior raised red flags. She had been seen arguing with Willie at the store just days before his death, her voice raised in anger as customers tried to pretend they weren't listening. Witnesses described her as emotional, unstable even, a young woman scorned by a lover who was pulling away. Detective Collins couldn't ignore the signs. The crime's sheer brutality suggested it was personal. As she delved deeper into Madison's life, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Madison, once enamored with the older man who had given her attention and gifts, had become increasingly possessive and desperate. When Willie tried to end the affair, Madison's emotions boiled over. Rage replaced passion, and betrayal turned to vengeance. What had started as a forbidden romance ended in a tragedy that rocked the town of Tifton. The secrets, lies, and simmering tensions culminated in a crime of passion, a reminder that love, when twisted by deceit and obsession, can lead to devastating consequences. What kind of love, or hatred, could drive someone to kill Willie Tanner in such a brutal manner? That was the burning question Detective Nora Collins set out to answer as she untangled the web of secrets and lies surrounding his tragic death. At the heart of the investigation was Madison Kelly, the 19-year-old high school senior who had been Willie's secret lover. Madison wasn't just a typical teenager. She was known in Tifton for her intelligence, charm, and involvement in extracurricular activities. She'd recently captivated audiences with her performance in the school's Christmas production of A Christmas Carol. But behind the polished exterior of the girl who had played Tiny Tim on stage was someone emotionally fragile and deeply conflicted, a young woman whose life had become entangled in a dangerous affair with a married man. Madison lived with her mother, Tammy Kelly, in a modest house on the outskirts of town. Tammy had a reputation for being strict and overbearing, a mother obsessed with appearances, especially after Madison's father had come out as gay and left the family years earlier. Tammy's controlling nature had placed immense pressure on Madison, fostering a yearning for independence and validation that Willie Tanner had seemed to fulfill. Detective Collins arrived at the Kelly residence on the afternoon of December 22, 2019. The house was quiet, with Christmas decorations that seemed to mock the grim reality of Willie's death. Madison was in her room, still in her pajamas, visibly shaken by the news. The space reflected her dual identity as both a typical teenager and someone consumed by an illicit relationship. Pop star posters covered the walls, but Colin's eyes were immediately drawn to the framed photo of Willie, shirtless, sitting on Madison's nightstand. It wasn't just a teenage crush, it was an obsession. Madison's diary provided an even more disturbing glimpse into her psyche. Pages were filled with graphic descriptions of her relationship with Willie, alternating between passionate declarations of love and paranoid fears of losing him. This wasn't just an affair, it was a dangerous fixation. Initially, Madison cooperated during her interview with Detective Collins. She admitted to the affair, describing how their relationship had grown over the past year. According to Madison, Willie had made her feel special, promising her gifts and affection that filled the void left by her tumultuous home life. But her tone shifted as she recounted recent weeks. Madison tearfully explained that Willie had become distant, no longer meeting her as often, and she feared he was preparing to end their relationship. "When he stopped answering my calls, I knew something was wrong," Madison said, her voice trembling. I thought he was done with me." When asked about her whereabouts on the night of the murder, Madison hesitated. "I was home. Studying," she stammered, glancing away. It was a weak alibi, and Detective Collins wasn't convinced. Madison's emotional instability, her obsession with Willie, and the timing of his death made her a prime suspect. Then, Madison dropped a bombshell. Her tearful account veered into a bizarre claim that a man named Bob had influenced her actions. According to Madison, Bob had convinced her to continue the relationship with Willie, threatening to harm her if she didn't comply. But when pressed for details, Madison became evasive, her story unraveling. Collins noted the erratic shifts in Madison's behavior, from grief to defensiveness to outright confusion, and knew there was more to uncover. The second person on Detective Collins' list was Lynn Tanner, Willie's wife of 25 years. Lynn was well known in Tifton, a warm and friendly woman active in the church and community events. To outsiders, Lynn and Willie seemed to have the perfect marriage. But as Collins would learn, Lynn's life wasn't as idyllic as it appeared. In recent years, the Tanners' marriage had grown strained. Their only child, Rifle, had gone off to college, leaving Lynn and Willie as empty nesters. According to Lynn, Willie had become distant, often working late and avoiding intimacy. She had begun to suspect he was hiding something, though she had no concrete proof. "I asked him," Lynn told Collins, her voice heavy with emotion during their interview at the kitchen table. "I begged him to tell me if there was someone else. He always denied it. But deep down, I knew." Lynn recounted the morning of Willie's death in painstaking detail. She had been preparing for the Christmas Eve service at First Baptist Church, throwing herself into volunteer work to distract from the growing void in her marriage. But her unease had grown in the weeks leading up to that morning. Willie had been more distracted than ever, spending long hours away from home and brushing off her attempts to connect with him. Detective Collins asked Lynn about her own whereabouts on the night of December 21st. Lynn explained that she had been at home, going over church plans until she fell asleep around 10 p.m. She claimed she didn't hear Willie come in and had assumed he'd worked late at the hardware store. Her timeline seemed plausible, but Collins couldn't ignore the possibility that Lynn's growing suspicions about her husband's affair might have led to a crime of passion. As Collins dug deeper, she found cracks in Lynn's story. Neighbors had reported hearing raised voices from the Tanner household just days before Willie's murder. One witness even claimed they had seen a woman, possibly Lynn, leaving the house late that evening, looking distressed. Could Lynn have confronted Willie about his affair, and had the argument escalated into violence? With two prime suspects, Madison and Lynn, Detective Collins faced mounting pressure to solve the case. Both women had motives, Madison's obsessive love for Willie and fear of abandonment, and Lynn's heartbreak and betrayal after years of devotion. But who had the rage to pick up a hammer and end Willie's life so brutally? As Collins pieced together the evidence, she began to see a pattern of lies, manipulation, and emotional turmoil that blurred the lines between victim and perpetrator. The answers were hidden in the tangled web of relationships Willie Tanner had left behind, a web that, once unraveled, would reveal the true cost of his secrets. The investigation wasn't over, but one thing was clear: this wasn't just a case of murder. It was a story of betrayal, obsession, and the destructive power of love gone wrong. Lynn Tanner claimed she had been at home the night of her husband's murder, preparing for the next day's church service. According to her, she had gone to bed early, assuming Willie would join her later. But when she woke up in the middle of the night and realized he wasn't there, she thought little of it, believing he had fallen asleep in the living room. It wasn't until the following morning that she stumbled upon the horrific scene that would forever change her life. Her account of the night was simple, almost too simple, and Detective Nora Collins couldn't shake the possibility that Lynn's long-simmering suspicions about Willie's infidelity might have driven her to commit the unthinkable. The crime's brutality suggested a deeply personal motive, and as Willie's wife of 25 years, Lynn had both the opportunity and a strong reason to lash out. Yet, Lynn's grief seemed genuine. Her willingness to cooperate with the investigation, offering access to Willie's personal belongings, including his phone and computer, spoke volumes. Still, Collins knew from experience that emotions could be deceptive. Pain, guilt, and rage often blended in ways that could fool even the sharpest investigator. Lynn's tears didn't erase the shadow of doubt that lingered over her story. The third name on Detective Collins' list was Tammy Kelly, Madison Kelly's mother. Tammy was a controlling and image-obsessed woman with a reputation for being as cold as she was calculated. Known in Tifton for her perfectly manicured appearance and strict demeanor, Tammy had spent years micromanaging every aspect of her daughter's life. After her husband had left the family upon coming out as gay, Tammy had doubled down on her efforts to maintain appearances, becoming a fixture in local church activities and community events. Her relationship with Madison, however, was far from healthy. While the town saw Tammy as a picture-perfect mother, neighbors whispered about her obsessive control over Madison. From her wardrobe to her social life, nothing escaped Tammy's scrutiny. There were even disturbing rumors. One suggesting Tammy would punish Madison for attracting too much attention from men, including public humiliation and severe discipline. When Detective Collins arrived at the Kelly residence on December 23, Tammy greeted her with an unnerving calm. Her living room was immaculate, adorned with perfectly placed Christmas decorations, including a sparkling tree and a pristine nativity scene. She offered Collins tea as if they were old friends, but there was an underlying tension in her body language, a stiffness that betrayed her composed demeanor. Tammy was quick to describe Willie Tanner as a respectable man and a pillar of the community, but her praise was distant, almost rehearsed. When the conversation shifted to Madison, however, Tammy's tone changed. She admitted she'd been worried about Madison's recent behavior, noting her daughter had started wearing makeup and dressing provocatively, behavior Tammy described as out of control. Collins asked Tammy if she had been aware of Madison's sexual relationship with Willie. At this, Tammy's composure faltered. She denied knowing about the affair, but her words were laced with bitterness. "I knew something was going on. She'd been acting different. Wearing tight clothes, flaunting herself. I told her she looked like a, well, you know." Her denial felt hollow. To Collins, it seemed possible that Tammy, driven by a mix of jealousy and fear of scandal, might have snapped. The idea of her teenage daughter embroiled in a relationship with a married man could have been Tammy's ultimate nightmare. Was it possible she had lashed out to protect her family's reputation? Still, Tammy remained calm and cooperative throughout the interview, never revealing a hint of remorse or guilt. Collins left the Kelly home with more questions than answers. Tammy's obsessive control over Madison and her icy demeanor made her a compelling suspect, but without concrete evidence, the case remained wide open. On the morning of December 24, just one day before Christmas, the investigation took a pivotal turn. Tifton was cloaked in gray skies and biting cold as Detective Collins and her team returned to the Tanner residence for another thorough search. Determined not to overlook anything, they meticulously combed through every corner of the house. It was then that an officer made a startling discovery near the fireplace. Among the carefully wrapped Christmas gifts lay a torn piece of paper, partially hidden under a rug. The fragment appeared to be part of a handwritten note. Only a few words were legible: "Dirty boy, meet me at," followed by a time, 1 p.m., and the initials, MK. The initials immediately caught Collins' attention. MK could only mean one person, Madison Kelly. The time mentioned in the note also aligned with the estimated time of Willie's death. This was the first tangible link placing Madison at the crime scene. Collins quickly sent the note to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, for forensic analysis, hoping to confirm whether the handwriting matched Madison's. While waiting for the results, Collins decided to revisit Madison's house. During the search of Madison's room, her team uncovered a notebook hidden beneath her mattress. Its contents were chilling. Page after page detailed Madison's obsession with Willie. There were vivid descriptions of their sexual encounters, her fantasies of a life together, and entries that revealed her growing paranoia and jealousy. One entry, dated December 22, stood out. It referenced a secret meeting with Willie at the exact time and place mentioned in the note found at the Tanner residence. This evidence not only placed Madison at the scene but also highlighted her emotional instability and potential motive. Collins now had a clearer picture of what might have happened. Madison, deeply in love with Willie and terrified of losing him, had grown increasingly erratic. The note suggested that Madison had planned to meet Willie that day, likely to confront him about his growing distance. But had the confrontation turned violent? As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Detective Collins still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Madison's obsession and Tammy's controlling nature created a toxic dynamic, one that could easily have spiraled out of control. And then there was Lynn, whose heartbreak and betrayal provided a motive just as strong. The investigation was far from over, but one thing was clear: the secrets Willie Tanner had kept, the lies he told to protect his double life, had led to his tragic end. What had started as a clandestine affair had unraveled into a deadly storm of obsession, betrayal, and violence, leaving the small town of Tifton forever changed. The investigation into Willie Tanner's brutal murder was finally beginning to take shape. Detective Nora Collins and her team had been relentless, and their hard work was paying off. Back at the station, the forensic analysis results from the note found at the crime scene arrived, and they were damning. The handwriting matched Madison Kelly's, and the initials, MK, left no room for doubt. This was the breakthrough Collins had been waiting for, and with it, the focus of the investigation narrowed squarely on Madison. The evidence was stacking up: the handwritten note, Madison's obsessive diary entries, and the timeline that placed her at the Tanner residence around the time of the murder. Madison Kelly was no longer just a person of interest, she was now the prime suspect in the shocking murder of Willie Tanner. Armed with the new evidence, Detective Collins brought Madison back in for a second interrogation. Madison, visibly more nervous than before, tried to maintain her composure but quickly unraveled under pressure. She immediately altered her story, spinning a bizarre and convoluted tale that seemed ripped from the pages of a dark thriller. According to Madison's revised account, a man named Bob, whom she described as her secret lover and a powerful politician, had been manipulating her for years. She claimed Bob was involved in sinister activities, satanic rituals, secret societies, and depraved practices, and had coerced her into a life of sin. Madison alleged that Bob had commanded her to kill Willie, threatening her with dire consequences if she refused. Detective Collins wasn't buying it. The story was too far-fetched, too desperate, and entirely unsupported by evidence. Collins leaned in, her voice calm but firm. "Madison, there is no Bob. The note, the diary, the timeline, they all lead back to you. This is your chance to tell the truth." Cornered, Madison broke down again, revising her story yet another time. This time, she claimed Bob wasn't a real person but a voice in her head, a manifestation of her supposed mental illness. Through tears, she insisted she wasn't in control of her actions on the night of the murder. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she sobbed. "I wasn't myself. Bob made me do it." But Collins wasn't swayed. The evidence painted a different picture, Madison as a young woman consumed by jealousy, rejection, and rage. The emotional intensity of her relationship with Willie, combined with his attempts to distance himself, had clearly pushed her to a breaking point. The elaborate stories about Bob were just a smokescreen to avoid responsibility. On December 26, 2019, just a day after Christmas, Madison Kelly was officially arrested for the murder of Willie Tanner. She was taken into custody without incident, her face eerily calm as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The sight of her being led away by officers sent shockwaves through the small town of Tifton. Neighbors and friends who had once admired Madison for her charm and ambition struggled to reconcile the young woman they thought they knew with the heinous crime she had committed. The Tanner's family, devastated by their loss, took some solace in knowing that the person responsible for Willie's death was finally behind bars. But the pain of his absence, especially during what should have been a season of joy, was immeasurable. Tifton buzzed with whispers and speculation. How could a promising 19-year-old, on the cusp of adulthood, commit such a horrific act? What had driven her to pick up a hammer and end the life of the man she supposedly loved? These were questions that would haunt the town long after the arrest. Madison Kelly's trial began in early February 2020. By then, the story had garnered statewide attention, with media outlets dubbing it the Christmas murder in Tifton. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious locals, and members of Willie's and Madison's families. Everyone wanted to hear the truth behind the shocking affair and the brutal murder. The prosecution painted a damning picture of Madison as a young woman driven by jealousy and obsession. They highlighted her diary entries, which revealed her emotional instability and her deep resentment toward Willie for pulling away from their relationship. The note found at the crime scene was presented as the final piece of the puzzle, placing Madison at the Tanner residence at the time of the murder. She was infatuated, obsessed, and ultimately rejected, the prosecutor declared during opening statements. And that rejection turned into rage, a rage that ended Willie Tanner's life. The defense, on the other hand, leaned heavily on the mental illness angle. Madison's lawyer argued that she had been battling severe psychological issues, including hallucinations and dissociative episodes. They claimed she was not in control of her actions and pleaded for leniency, suggesting she be placed in a psychiatric facility rather than prison. Madison took the stand, delivering a tearful testimony. She spoke about her troubled home life, her controlling mother, and her feelings of abandonment. She admitted to the affair with Willie but insisted she had loved him and never intended to hurt him. Her account, however, wavered under cross-examination, and her shifting stories did little to bolster her credibility. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 2 days before reaching a unanimous verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Madison Kelly was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As the sentence was read, Madison showed little emotion, her expression blank as if the weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. For Willie Tanner's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but no sentence could bring him back. Lynn Tanner, who had been present every day of the trial, released a brief statement after the sentencing. "Willie was not perfect, but he didn't deserve to die this way. Our family will never be the same." The tragedy left an indelible mark on Tifton, Georgia. For months, the town was consumed by the details of the affair, the murder, and the trial. People who had once admired Willie Tanner now debated his moral failings, while others sympathized with Madison's troubled upbringing and emotional turmoil. But for Detective Nora Collins, the case was a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal, obsession, and unchecked emotions. What had begun as a forbidden affair had spiraled into a tragedy that destroyed multiple lives. As the town tried to move on, one truth remained clear: the choices made by Willie Tanner and Madison Kelly had set in motion a chain of events that could never be undone. If you're captivated by stories like this and want more gripping true crime content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more incredible stories, so join our growing community today. You won't want to miss what's coming next.